Kia ora, hello, and welcome. Today we are going to talk about how donor-sibling connections can help your child really flourish. It's a truly wonderful opportunity for you and your family. We have had fantastic feedback about this webinar from parents, counsellors, and donor-conceived people, and we are so excited to have you joining us.
So firstly, an introduction. I'm Emma. I'm a donor-conceived person, I'm a parent, and I'm a member of Donor Conceived Aotearoa New Zealand. Our goal is to achieve happier and healthier donor-conceived people and their families. We love to collaborate with parents and fertility service providers to build resources that help you get the best outcomes. Ultimately, it's your child's well-being that is our inspiration.
We have learned so much by listening to parents and fertility service providers, and we are so grateful for your honesty and trust in us. It really means so much when we get this wonderful feedback from parents about how we are making their families happier and healthier. It's really inspiring for us and sometimes makes me tear up a little bit to know that we are making a difference for you and your family. So, why do we even need to talk about donor siblings? I mean, isn't everything fine already? Indeed, we might think that we are already doing enough because things have changed compared to the bad old days. We started off with secrecy and anonymous donors. Parents were advised not to tell, and donors were promised anonymity. Since then, there have been two major transitions in what is accepted as best practice for donor conception. The first step of early disclosure was a good start. It's quite clear now that finding out as an adult that you are donor conceived can hugely disrupt your sense of identity as well as severely damage your relationship with your parents. Best practice for early disclosure suggests telling before age 3 is ideal. People who have always known that they were donor conceived feel more comfortable about it. Even so, many donor conceived people are still curious to learn more about their genetic origins despite early disclosure. My friend Beck speaks to us about her curiosity despite having always known that she was donor conceived.
Kia ora. My name's Beck, and my parents used an anonymous donor to conceive me back in the late 1970s. I'm one of the so-called lucky ones from my era because my parents told me the truth about donor conception from day one. I literally have no memory of ever not knowing the truth. This normalised donor conception for me and enabled me to have a really wonderful and honest relationship with my dad. And this was especially important since my dad died when I was just 9 years old. But the one thing that my parents' honesty couldn't replace was my need to know my full identity. I spent basically my whole life trying to find out who my biological father was.
So this brings us to the second step of modern donor conception, allowing the identifying information of donors to be released. This gives donor-conceived people the option to contact the donor, usually after they turn 18, and we know that up to 60% of donor-conceived people do take this option when given the opportunity. However, there are still some problems with ID-released donors, and it is still not offered in all countries. Because the contact and extra information comes when the child is grown up, it is too late to be truly helpful for identity formation, which peaks in adolescence. In some countries, release of identifying information is not guaranteed, and additional donor consent is required, which they may not give. The donor may have already passed away or may not agree to contact. Unfortunately, many parents have not been given adequate information and support to make this choice, if it is even an option in their country. In New Zealand, legislation states that donor-conceived people born after the 21st of August 2005 can access the identifying information of the donor after they turn 18. And their parents can access this information at any time after they are born, before 18. Additional donor consent is not required. So, yes, we also consider that these two components are essential aspects of modern donor conception practices. But unfortunately, it's clear that they are not enough for some donor conceived people or have not been possible. Now, if we think about a plant growing, the basics for growth are light and water. But to make it really thrive, it needs fertilizer. In donor conception, early disclosure and identity release donors are the basics. Donor sibling connections are the fertilizer for your child. This is going to help your child really flourish as a donor conceived person and is the third major transition in donor conception best practice. Many parents are starting this process and building these connections already. And it's something every parent can do, no matter what type of donor you used. It's a fantastic way to really support your donor conceived child. We are so excited to talk to you about this, and this is just an opportunity that previous generations simply didn't have. Now, it may feel that there are many obstacles when it comes to donor sibling connections. There are also many wonderful benefits and opportunities. There are some important considerations to get the best outcomes, so we will talk to you about what you need to know and why. Let's get started. Now, our recommendations aren't just opinions, they are based on the best available evidence. 9 research articles covering the experiences of parents and donor-conceived teens and young adults are the basis for our recommendations. The research encompasses responses from 321 donor-conceived people as young as 12 years old, 329 single mothers, 319 mothers from 2 mum families, and 167 parents from heterosexual couples. So, hundreds of donor-conceived people and hundreds of parents from many different family types inform our guidance to you. We have interspersed the research evidence with helpful tips and insights from parents we interact with on social media. Thank you so much to all of you who have contributed. You will find that their experiences and concerns mirror your own. So, it's really important to understand our starting point. How do parents feel when considering donor-sibling connections? What are the obstacles? We asked parents about their feelings and received many valuable responses. To start with, there is additional complexity to consider, and perhaps it feels as if there is some difficulty explaining what this relationship is and isn't to your child. Parents might worry about getting on with the other parents and what your relationship should be. Life is already busy with work and parenting, and these additional things can feel overwhelming. It may not be just about the parent relationships. LGBTQ and single-parent families may feel uncomfortable not knowing if other families will accept them and their family makeup. Understandably, they don't want to expose their children to spaces that could be harmful. For other parents, they simply aren't aware that this is an option. It was never raised at the clinic. And the concept of connecting with siblings while their children are young is not even on the radar. And so, the idea of siblings when it comes can be a bit of a revelation for parents, an unknown. And as a result, there may be a fear or apprehension over opening Pandora's box. Many people also seem to avoid it because it makes them uncomfortable to think about the realities of donor conception. If one doesn't know of donor siblings, then maybe we can pretend that they don't exist. Parents who are aware of this possibility often say that they want to leave it up to their child to decide. However, this is still a choice and is different from how we would treat other relatives. We don't usually wait for our children to ask to meet their cousins or grandparents, for example. We take the lead and build these relationships for them. Another reason could be trying to protect them from appearing different in a negative way. If they talk about having 20 siblings when they are too young to answer follow-up questions to explain this, parents are worried they might feel very different from their classmates. There may be differences in opinions between the parents. For some, it can feel too big or confronting. Ultimately, it can boil down to the simplest of questions. Are we enough? So, there are plenty of understandable reasons and concerns which explain why parents don't choose to connect with donor siblings. And it's important to be aware of these obstacles so that parents can best prepare their expectations and plan accordingly. So, we'll come back to some of this a bit more later. From the parent's perspective, these obstacles may initially outweigh any potential benefits. So we need to look at this in a different way. Why would we seek out donor-sibling connections when it's potentially so uncomfortable? What are the opportunities? Some parents notice that their child is feeling very different and alone. They want to introduce their child to their donor siblings so that they will know that there are others in the world just like them. Parents even see the donor siblings as a potential support network and that they may lean on each other for support and understanding. There may be concerns about their child inadvertently ending up dating someone they are related to. They don't want their teenager to have to face awkward conversations about whether their love interest is potentially a relative. And for donor-conceived people, this is a real worry they keep in the back of their mind. Could this person be a half-brother or sister? Donor-conceived people may have incomplete medical histories, and parents may be curious if any of the siblings have the same medical problems, learning challenges, or behavioral issues. Donor-conceived people often find it hard to build sibling relationships as adults, and they may feel left out when joining a sibling group later on because they didn't get to have those same early connections as the others. Parents are starting to realize the need to open these connections during childhood so that later, when they're young adults, they can choose whether to see each other or talk to each other or not. Parents are seeing the importance of keeping that possibility open for them. By listening to the experiences of parents and donor-conceived people, it is clear that many of these concerns cannot be solved with early disclosure and ID release donors alone. Donor-sibling connections may in fact have many benefits. So, what happens when we do make these connections? The research tells us that most donor-conceived people have positive contact experiences with donor siblings. In these two studies, 85% felt positively or very positively about the contact. My friend Sophie speaks of her experience meeting same donor siblings and how valuable this has been for her.
Hi, I'm Sophie, and I was conceived by a sperm donation in the mid-1980s. Remarkably, for that era, I've benefited from all three of the shifts Emma's spoken about. I was told from a very young age about my conception, and although it took me about 10 years to understand what it all meant, my brother somehow understood a lot earlier. And while each child is different, I do think our parents would have benefited from some of the resources available today to parents to help tell that story. The donor that our parents used, which is another way of referring to our genetic father, didn't donate anonymously to the clinic, and we grew up knowing that we could meet our genetic father and his family if we wanted to. Then, when I was 17 and my brother was 13, we met some of our siblings for the first time. This included 3 same donor siblings, as well as our half-brother who was raised by our genetic father. Interestingly, it wouldn't be until I was about 25 that I had any interest in meeting our genetic father, and that's not actually a relationship I've maintained today, despite maintaining a relationship with his 2 raised children, my half-brother and my half-sister. I have close relationships with some of my same donor siblings, but not all of them. That's okay though, I know where they are and where they sit in my family. Sadly, we have 3 same donor siblings who haven't been told they're donor conceived, and we may never meet them, and that part is hard to deal with. It's always been the siblings aspect that I was most interested in, and it's been my relationship with my siblings that has been the most formative for my identity, developing my identity as a donor conceived person. So I'm immensely proud of all the parents who are listening to this webinar and who are being curious and brave to find out more about how you can support your donor conceived child become a really healthy and secure donor conceived person. So thank you.
Sophie's experience is mirrored in the research. Donor conceived people benefit knowing their same donor siblings. If we come back to this little boy who was feeling very different and alone, his parent says it changed his whole countenance to know that there are these other kids who are related to him. Donor conceived people tell us it is really interesting, especially now that I have all my donor siblings in the mix, because it doesn't feel as confusing. It doesn't feel like as much of a mystery. They describe, it's been awesome to meet them. I've gotten to know more about myself and who I am. This boy said, it was really nice when I was growing up just to know more people who were in the same situation and how they dealt with other people's curiosity and the world around them. I feel like we had more of a shared experience. How beautiful is that, and who wouldn't want that for their child? Donor sibling connections are described even more powerfully when things with the donor do not work out as hoped. This is emotionally described by the following quote. We know each other now, and it was just a little bit repairing to get in contact with the same donor siblings after I was so devastated. When we return to Beck's story, we hear about how meeting genetic relatives has been repairing for her too.
I spent basically my whole life trying to find out who my biological father was. I finally found out 3 years ago through online DNA testing. Sadly for me, I learned that he had died when I was just 2 years old. I never got to be able to meet the man who gave me half my DNA, the grandfather of my 4 children, the man who, it turns out, had the exact same profession as I do now. But alongside that sad news, I also gained something truly special: siblings. In my case, there's a generational offset. My biological father had adult children by the time I was conceived, which means that my siblings are my mum's age. So it's not like a normal sibling relationship. Yet through them, I get this tangible, visceral sense of who my biological father was. They shared their memories of him with me and given me as complete a picture as I could ever have dreamed of to help me fill in the missing half of my identity. My favourite photo now sits on my bedside table, the hands of my brother and I intertwined. My siblings mean the world to me and have finally brought some peace after a lifetime of searching.
So, just as it has been for Beck, the research concludes that through identifying similarities and differences between themselves and their donor siblings, they obtained a better sense of their genetic background and identity. It goes on to say that this desire to know more about their genetic origins is developmentally appropriate in adolescence, as identity formation is at its peak. Parents need to understand that curiosity is natural and is no reflection on their child's satisfaction with the family that's raising them. The positive experiences of donor-conceived people suggest that the benefits of contact include not only identity-relevant information through shared traits and experiences, but also relationships with and support from people who understand the uncommon experience of being donor-conceived. one of the major conclusions from the research was that there is a need to educate families about the potential benefits of donor-sibling connections. Current research suggests that growing up knowing same donor siblings may be just as important as early disclosure to help normalize donor conception. Now, parents also report positive outcomes for themselves and very few negative experiences. Remember, this is based on the experience of hundreds of parents. There were no significant differences in outcomes between two-mum families, single-mum families, heterosexual couples with regards to the parents' or the children's experiences of contacting or meeting donor siblings. It is also helpful to know that of those seeking donor sibling connections, a significant proportion are two-mum families and single-mum families. It might be reassuring to know that you are very likely to find families similar to your own. For all families seeking donor siblings, they must be aware that there are many family types now using donor conception and be ready to be accepting of these different family types. My friend Hayley generously shares her experiences as a parent negotiating same donor sibling connections for her children.
Hi everyone, for those of you that have not met me, I'm Hayley and I'm a donor conceived person, but I'm also a mum to donor conceived children with my wife. So I'm from the UK and you may have come across me on Instagram with my handle of DCP Journey to RP or via my website, All Things Donor Conception, where I share information, support and resources about this really important topic. So Emma's asked me to come on just to have a little chat with you about donor siblings and to specifically discuss how we found it in our family connecting with our children's donor siblings. Now, our children, we've got twins and boy-girl twins, and they are just over 6 now. And we connected with their donor siblings when they were about 2.5. So I'll probably break it down into sort of the challenges at the start and then some of the positive things that we found as a result of connecting with those families. So the initial challenge was probably actually locating the siblings in the first place. We were able to do this through social media connection type groups as a result of using the donor ID number that we used. So once we were connected with a number of families that had used the same donor, I think one of the biggest challenges was the kind of the fear or the apprehension of what we might find in those groups. It was a complete unknown kind of entity. We didn't know anybody that had connected with their children's donor siblings. And I think it was just, like I say, a real kind of fear of we didn't know what to expect. But actually, once we got in the group, we were quickly met with some really friendly families. And that's how it kind of remained for a couple of years, purely just connecting through the internet. One of the challenges was that we were some distance away from the other families, but I think when our kids were younger, there wasn't an overwhelming desire to rush out and meet them. I think we were kind of just bedding into getting to know the different families. And for a few years, we exchanged communication via photographs in the group, messages, little updates, and it quickly became evident that it was going to be something really positive in our lives. One of the huge positives, not only being able to identify who these families were and where they were located, but was also being able to share medical issues if anything arose, or developmental milestones between the siblings. And on a purely curiosity level, it was quite fascinating actually to see some of the likeness physically and kind of in some of the kids' personalities between the siblings. More recently, we actually traveled to go and meet 3 of the families. So my wife and I traveled with our 2 children to go and meet some of their donor siblings, which was an amazing experience. And we all stayed together for 3 days, I think it was, just getting to know each other a bit more and letting the kids play. Most of the kids were kind of only either a year older or a year younger. And it was just a fabulous experience. And one that I think at the start we were really nervous about, but actually I'm really pleased that we did it. And I think a real positive to come out of the experience, which I wasn't probably expecting, was the fact that us as parents have become quite close, even though we don't see each other all the time. Like I say, most of the communication is done virtually. It's been a nice kind of another nice element to it, that is the parents, we've kind of got that extended support network, which is just really, really lovely to have. So thank you for listening to my little bit here. I hope it's helpful. And like I say, I'm sure the rest of this resource is going to be very helpful to you all too. So take care.
Hayley's experience is like that of so many other parents. It is normal to have some initial hesitation and uncertainty, and the research shows that this is usually resolved upon meeting the other families, just like Hayley has found. The experience of this parent perfectly describes the feelings and transition of so many others. At first, it was unsettling to know that there were several siblings out there. I've gotten over that feeling, and I enjoy hearing about the other kids. I have pictures of several on the refrigerator. Parents describe that they were initially motivated by curiosity, but then surprised that it turned out to be a more wonderful experience than they'd ever imagined. They became a family of sorts who shares a special bond. Many parents did not simply note their own clicking, but also highlighted that the children had a special connection and from the beginning interacted differently than with peers. It is so heartwarming to hear parents describe their connections as enriching, wonderful, fun, a strong and special bond, and more positive than expected. One of our parent friends on social media described it like this: "When we met our first sibling, I was stunned at their instant connection, like they'd known each other their whole lives. They were both 4 at the time, and I distinctly remember them seeing each other, walking to each other, and instantly embracing. Over the few days we spent together, we marveled at how they mirrored each other in expression and hand movements, how truly connected they were to one another. This was unusual for my son. This scenario was repeated over and over with each sibling we met, that instant bond that this person is a part of you. This only reinforced to me how much they need to know each other on some level." So overall, it can be really great for both parents and their children. At the same time, it is really important to be aware that there are also some challenges so that we can better prepare. Challenges may come in the form of relationships. Donor-conceived people and parents may not get along as well as hoped. Parents may not always click. It is important to remember that the point of contact is to facilitate making these connections for your child. It's less about whether the parents get along and more about opening the door for that contact so that your child can make that choice for themselves whether to continue or not when they get older. A common challenge is differences between the parents' attitudes towards managing these new relationships between their children. For example, some parents are not comfortable telling the children they are related. Explaining the relationship when the children are young does not need to be complicated. It can be as simple as saying that the family used the same donor as yours and leave it at that. As times go by, more information can be added. It is also not obligatory to meet with these families. As one parent put it, "We don't meet those families because we won't ask our son to lie and make him feel ashamed or dishonest. He knows these siblings exist and wants to meet them, but he agrees that lying is not good and he's not okay with that. He's also afraid of slipping up and the other parents getting mad at him or us." Some parents take this secrecy even further. Another parent friend tells us about their group. Some parents go as far as not giving their children's name. This is upsetting when knowing a first and last name is a minimum amount that all donor-conceived people should have access to, because that is information that is essential for their future safety and well-being. This then leads to another area of challenge: the differences in expectations about the amount of contact between families. Some parents want more contact than others. Some families live far apart, making contact in person more difficult. Parents can feel under some pressure when it comes to the amount of contact. Meeting once a year might be enough for some families. Other families may enjoy meeting more often if it's convenient. There is no right or wrong. Being aware that others may want less contact than you is important. Life is busy, and we have to understand that most families are juggling a number of pressures. One suggestion that has come up repeatedly as a bare minimum is to have a closed Facebook group for the sibling families, where one can post things like photos, videos, greetings, a group which all families can join and know everyone. It may also be helpful to set up a spreadsheet where all the kids' birthdays are known so that birthday greetings can go out. Keep in mind that the type of contact will also change as the children get older and can manage the contact more themselves. It is wise to remain open to families wanting connection, regardless of where they live, because not everyone is open to a relationship. And that feeling that you vibe is special, important, and sustaining. In terms of ways to meet, parents have suggested a large yearly sibling meetup where everyone who wants to attend is welcome. It is sensible if that is at a place where each family can be responsible for making their own booking, since it's easier to handle if some families need to cancel. Now, of course, there can be additional meetups too. It's good to be sensitive that not all families have the same resources, and travel may not be an option. There may be different interest levels in the donor, and that can be polarizing, bringing some siblings and families closer together than others. This can be a similar issue for parents, with some families wanting to find out the identity of the donor earlier than others. Parents need to be aware of this and consider how to prepare. We now know that the identity of many donors can be uncovered despite anonymity. More parents are considering earlier than 18 contact, and this opens new challenges that the existing research does not address, as this was just not possible in the past. And indeed, this may be especially complex if there are large numbers of siblings and therefore large numbers of families connecting with a variety of opinions. If you have used donated sperm from the USA or an international bank, for example, sibling groups of 50 to 100 are not uncommon. Understandably, that can be confronting. For the most basic reason of avoiding accidental incest, it is important to know who the siblings are. In these larger groups, it will change over time as new families join, and maybe some families will step back. It's extremely important to report births so that clinics and banks have an awareness of the number of donor-conceived people they have created from one donor. In New Zealand, family limits of around 5 to 7 families mean that 8 to 20 siblings could be a realistic number for those using donated sperm. When it comes to large sibling groups, many people would feel that so many kids would be overwhelming to think of. And yet, if you look at a young person's social media, they often have 1,000 or more friends. It doesn't mean they're close with all of them in the same way, but they do follow each other. It's early to know what's possible with these large, known from birth or early childhood sibling groups. We regularly know and interact with large communities fluidly and easily via social networks, and we are lucky to live in a time where we can knit together somewhat easily in virtual spaces. With larger groups, there is a greater chance of a variety of viewpoints, especially when it comes to connecting with the donor. One parent gave us a detailed outline of what might lie ahead, describing, "Uncovering the identity of a donor ahead of 18 introduces a shift or a sort of decision point. If the search, or the result of the search, is not disclosed, then there is a secret. Maybe this knowledge is shared with only a few that they can trust. Again, this too creates a secret and an in-out group." If the group discusses searching openly ahead of time, this could create a divide between the families who want to search and those who don't. Do you agree as a group when and how to outreach? If someone reaches out without agreement of the rest in an insensitive manner, how do you repair that? These are difficult conversations to have, and it's advisable to set emotions to one side and really try to understand the other person's perspective. What are their values as to why they think this is the best course of action? This is a complex area to discuss, and we don't have all the answers. However, we have a responsibility to you to raise this so that you can consider it ahead of time. Now, alternatively, there may be no siblings. Families who have used egg donors will commonly have less siblings to find than families who have used sperm donors. As one parent put it, "I think it's important to be aware you might be the first one looking for connection. Many stories seem to focus on the shock and complexity of discovering large sibling groups, but this isn't always the case, and it can feel lonely and disappointing not to find other parents working to support their children to connect with siblings." Also, some of the donor siblings might not know that they are donor conceived. For example, in New Zealand, the fertility service provider might be able to provide a de-identified list of siblings with their gender and year of birth. You might know that there are 9 siblings, for example. However, if the parents have not disclosed or are not open to connection, then you might not be able to know these people or their identities. In other countries, birth registration may not be mandatory, and so you may not know how many other siblings are out there. In situations where donor siblings cannot be found or are not local, it is recommended to connect with other families locally who have also used donor conception. That will build that support network and help normalize the experience of being donor conceived. I've asked my friend Mel to speak of her experience meeting other families who have used donor conception.
Hi, my name's Mel Johnson, and I'm a solo parent to my daughter who's 5. I became a parent using IVF with donor sperm because I felt like if I didn't do something on my own, then I might miss out on becoming a parent altogether, which I really didn't want to think about. When I embarked on the journey to solo parenthood, I didn't know anybody else who had used donor conception to conceive. And so I didn't really think too much about meeting anyone else in that same situation. However, as my journey has progressed and my daughter has got older, and I've spoken to many donor conceived people about the subject, I've realised it's really important for my daughter to meet others in the same circumstances as her. I would love for my daughter to meet her donor siblings. I think it would be amazing, and I have tried to connect with them. I used a sperm bank in the UK, and there may not be lots of siblings, which in some ways is a positive, but in other ways means it is more difficult for me to connect with people. I have joined a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, I have put messages out on Instagram. I really am trying to find other people who've used the same donor so that I can connect my daughter with her donor siblings early. Because I've not been able to find her donor siblings, what I have done is connected her to other donor conceived people who've been raised by solo parents. I've really noticed that she loves this. So recently we went on a camping trip with 20 solo parents and their children, and Daisy, my daughter, talked about how much she loved the fact that everybody was in the same family type as us, and nobody else had a father in their life. And so for Daisy, that was quite reassuring. And at 5, I think it's very good for her to see that there's other children in the same situation as her. And as she grows up and is able to better talk about it, she'll have some friends who are in exactly the same situation who she can talk to, and they can discuss how they feel about it, and they can really be there for support for each other. I will continue to search for donor siblings, and when Daisy is old enough to really discuss it and talk about it in more depth, I will involve her. But for now, I will continue to spend time with other people who have been donor conceived so that she grows up surrounded by people who are in a similar situation to her. I've really seen the benefit, and she has explicitly shared the benefit to her.
So, where to from here? When do we do this? Where do we find donor siblings? And how do we prepare? If you do decide to proceed, then it might be helpful to know that there is no rush after you've reported the birth of your donor-conceived child to the clinic or bank. In fact, it is important to take time to establish your family before contacting same donor siblings. Some parents have a lot of worries in the early days of donor conception. Worries about whether they will bond with their baby without a genetic connection. The last thing you need at this time is the added pressure of connecting with donor siblings. It's important to take time to establish yourself as a family and feel secure in your parenting before proceeding. That said, there are some things to keep in mind with respect to timing. Contact should happen before adolescence to get the maximum benefit for identity formation. And it's clear that many school-age children will feel comfort in knowing that there are other donor-conceived people just like them. So early connection might be helpful. Parents should make the decision to connect and not wait for their children to ask. Proceed slowly and sit with any feelings that arise. One of our parent friends said to us, "I found it really useful to gently clarify my reasons for reaching out and to allow lots of time for messaging between the parents and contextualizing the new relationships for my kids before progressing to face-to-face catch-ups." How to go about finding siblings depends on which country you are in and any applicable legislation. In Australia and New Zealand, you could start by contacting your fertility service provider. Some of them will facilitate connections. In the Australian state of Victoria, you can contact VARTA. Similarly, some USA and international sperm banks will offer family linking services, similarly for egg banks. Legislation in New Zealand states that clinics cannot disclose the identifying details of donor-conceived people without their consent. Other countries may need to use online resources, such as Donor Sibling Registry. You can search for free, but need to pay to join and exchange messages. There are many Facebook groups for connecting with same donor families. Sometimes these are arranged by Donor ID or by the clinic. There is a saying, being forewarned is forearmed. The best way to prepare is to work through potential feelings or scenarios. Speaking to a counsellor experienced in donor conception who can help you work through your feelings and expectations is also recommended. Sharing this resource with other parents in your group can act as an opportunity to discuss possible issues and expectations. We have prepared a downloadable list of considerations to help you work through things. There are also a number of other really helpful resources out there. If you haven't seen the Future People documentary, please check it out. There's a link to it on our website. It spans an 8-year period following a group of adolescents who connect when they learn that they are all children of the same sperm donor. It is a beautiful film and a unique opportunity to hear from young donor-conceived people in their own words. If you have trouble getting access in your country, please get in touch with us via email or Instagram and we might be able to help. You might have come across our website. We have a foundation document on here. It's called Basic Principles for Understanding the Needs and Perspectives of Donor-Conceived People. It's based on the available research and it highlights the range of experiences of donor-conceived people so that parents can learn how to best support their child. Thank you to Mel, who you can also find on Instagram, and to Hayley. Hayley is working with child psychologist Dr. Avita Perlman to build a resource through Paths to Parent Hub about connecting with same donor siblings. So if you'd like to go into more detail, check it out. Hayley has such a lovely, thoughtful approach as well as this real life experience, so it's sure to be very useful. It's important to remember that donor-conceived children grow up into donor-conceived adults. We would like our parents to keep the doors open and create opportunities for us so that then later we can make our own decisions. Donor-sibling connections have the potential to be so great for your child and for you. We've talked about why it's so wonderful, when and how to make those connections, and how to prepare. It takes some courage for parents to do this. Some parents are going to be able to have that courage, and if you do, you're going to see your child really flourish.
Thank you for being here and being open to doing things better for your child. We love your feedback, so please let us know what you think of this resource. If this was helpful for you, then please share it. Share it with other families, on your social media, with your fertility service provider and the wider community so that more families can benefit. The more that we can normalise donor-sibling connections, the easier it will be for everyone to make these connections. If you have ideas for other resources that you would like us to build, we would love to hear them because ultimately we are here for you. Until next time, ngā mihi, goodbye and good luck on your journey.